Oh, million.
My next video after the Minecraft one was going to be on Sonic, in a very general sense, and why I put so much enmity between us. You know what though? There's already been a lot of negativity in my commentary videos, a lot more than I intended when I first started out. Don't get me wrong, dogging on random video games that are a bit too popular to feel bad for is funny and all, but as I begin on this script, September 9th, 2023, the first day of Sage 23 has just arrived. Sage being the place I've met a good handful of my current internet pals and first started getting people to actually play my own game, I figure, why not celebrate the thing about Sonic that brings people together instead? That's right, indies with vaguely comparable 90s to mid-2000s energy that don't involve Sonic directly.
It's not worth it! It's just...
Last year I did individual videos on each game and reviewed them really in-depth. But I mean, I'm not getting paid to review them, and they're not getting paid for you to play them, so you know what, let's not draw things out quite so much this year. I'll try to get a bit more to the point this time. Here are a bunch of cool games and why you should play them. Starting off the lightning round, where last year's titles now? Voyage, going slow and steady as ever, has one new level, but that's not quite the full story. This second level introduces far more enemies and environmental details than the first one had. The harder difficulty levels are also much more deserving of their titles now, with me taking over an hour just to get through the first stage on its hardest setting. Some of my suggestions to make the controls more fluid have been taken, though some of them have also been disabled in the aforementioned harder modes. Not quite sure how to feel about nerfing player control as a difficulty feature, but it does work. It's also worth noting that a lot of things in the second level can get a bit buggy, but, well, I'm not one to judge. Super Freak's Ultimate Edition's difficult to put into a lightning round because what didn't it add? The other half of the levels and bosses, several alternate modes, new unlockable characters, a secret final boss, oh yeah, and it does have an OST now too. In fact, that's what you'll be hearing for most of this video, because it's darn good stuff. The game's more or less gone from short demo to full product in a year, and even though it's still fairly short, the high difficulty of some of the remix content could very well keep you busy a good while. Round the Mind. Look, Phil already rolled a minimum luck stat of character creation, and despite that he still sacrificed a ton of time helping compose for Super Freaks. It's kinda funny, but real talk, the man deserves some respect. And with that out of the way, on to the new stuff. Bud, B-U-D-D, whatever, is a melee-focused action platformer, so far light metroidvania, and above all else, a stellar example of what I like to call ultra-modern retro design. The gameplay's limited, simple, tightly designed, and mid-paced, but smooth to an absolute sheen and crammed with so much controlled kinesis that the simple act of whacking an enemy that just walks back and forth feels fresh and satisfying the whole time. That could practically be the whole review right there, because this is a great game for those days when you just feel like smashing pixels real hard. But I guess I shouldn't be quite that punctual, eh? The Metroidvania element of Bud comes from its namesakes, the Buds, these cute little robot drones. Each one has a single ability, but what makes them more interesting is that they function on a recharging meter and usually have at least two special utilities on top of being a damage and attack. The function of each also changes a bit if you charge them up, though that also uses up more meter. Enemies drop recharge batteries on defeat, so between your basic combo, the two buds I've managed to find so far, and the couple additional moves you unlock, there's a, once again, very simple but very satisfying combat flow to the game. Bud's and Space Bounty Huntress theming aside, Bud actually plays a lot more like Zelda 2, surprisingly. It's a lot less frustrating, fortunately, but your main method of attack is swordplay. There's an experience and leveling system, and you also gain the iconic pogo sword attack by leveling up. Zeldaroidvania? Another thing worth mentioning is that this game seems way more story-focused than the previous ones I've covered. There's not a ton so far, but basically, stuff's going wrong in space for mysterious reasons, and this obvious twist villain, Computer Lady, is not very understanding of the fact we just got shot down and crash-landed on a deadly jungle planet. She treats the whole attempt on our life thing about how you'd expect a teacher to react if you prove the dog really did eat your homework. Basically, okay, I'll forgive you this time, but still, skill issue.
You've got to do better. Shut your play hole!
Speaking of speaks our life, Eris, the protagonist. She's nothing incredible, but I like her. She's a lovable goofball with enough cool factor to feel like a believable heroine, but enough of the exaggerated swagger of an anime dingus to not feel overly try-hard. If Samus writes in her space journal about how nothing scares her more than the idea of something as powerful as her, but without her moral character, Eris probably rambles about that kind of thing while drunk at the bar daily until someone throws her out. But she'll also inevitably save the galaxy at the end of the game. If you're gonna go this 80s anime, this is definitely the way to do it. Alright. Perfectly balanced, Ailme. All things should be. I do have a bit of a twofer. Threefer? Several small complaints with a larger overall theme. The hitbox for your sword feels a bit too small, and if this makes sense, literal at times. Combine that with getting stunned and knocked back every time you take damage, and an invulnerability period that feels a bit too short for how little health you have, and it is needlessly easy to go from on fire to drowning in turds in this game.
Man. Seeming sus lately.
Oh yeah, also two smaller critiques. I'm not a fan of double tap to sprint, or this effect in the space station hub sort area. I get what it's going for, it's like you're inside a huge ring, but it kinda hurts my head a bit. But now let's talk about the game I was actually looking forward to this year. Okay, I can explain. Remember last year when I said Super Freaks Dev's early work is what sold me on Game Maker? Well, that was a half-truth. What I should have said is that it was this specific game that nobody but him ever actually got to play. That's right, this here is lost media from the age of YouTube poop and the Yo-Yo Games Sandbox website. Before the indie boom, before beginner-friendly game engines were taken seriously, before any of the results you'll get from Google and popular Game Maker games, this is what inspiration looked like. But is it good now? I mean, yeah? Impressive wouldn't exactly be the word, but it is quite a fun little arcade-style shmup, and the twist of being semi-freeform instead of an auto-scroller makes it more enjoyable and interesting than it'd otherwise be. Instead of simply being pushed along to the end of the level, your objective's to track down and rescue all the rainbow monkeys. They're the perfect energy source, after all. Find the exit door and beat the boss. Despite most stages still being a left-to-right affair, this structure allows for much fresher design of stronger gimmicks. Some levels are a mad dash, some have you playing a bit more tactically around more dangerous enemies, and some twist and turn in on themselves. Throw in some really fun and kinda OP power-ups and a challenging but not overly difficult final boss that makes use of said power-ups. You have a very well-rounded hour-long adventure with an unusual style and a nostalgic early internet feel to it. Oh yeah, it also for whatever reason has a ton of cosmetic character choices. They don't change the gameplay at all, but a load of characters from Sage and beyond get repped here. Heck, there's not one but two versions of Freb. You love to see it. Well, I do, anyway. Frebnos will return and end Sage. Mr. Shoot'em's a fiddly-ass game that I was nonetheless recommended repeatedly, and a perfect example of why you should fiddle-ass-proof your games as much as possible. It actually is really fun after you put in the 10 minutes or so it takes to get the slightest feel for what you're doing. This game is like a cross between Breakout, air hockey, and, well, a really basic retro platform shooter, I guess, but being crossed with Breakout and air hockey is more than enough novelty. Your goal? Breaking all these blocks with this puck. Your fail state? Letting the puck into your goal. How do you move your puck? By shooting it. With Super Metroid controls. There are no power-ups, no enemies, no gimmicks. The challenge is entirely inherent, at least so far, and as fiddly as it starts out feeling, you know what, it also feels really good to nail high-speed saves or to absolutely annihilate rows of bricks by just emptying a clip into the ball without even letting it get close to your side of the screen. You have limited consecutive shots and limited tries per level, but, you know, despite what I've said, it's not really that hard. It understands that it's jank and starts you at an appropriate difficulty level. I really do see potential in this gameplay style. Once things like enemies and stage gimmicks do start getting introduced, there are a million directions you could take this that have probably never really been done before. It's the least polished game I've played this year, but it's also the most original. And while originality isn't everything, it also isn't nothing. There's one boss fight, but unfortunately, or fortunately, it doesn't actually make use of the game's main mechanics. You just kinda shoot your gun at this big coffee machine until it explodes. I feel like knocking the ball into cracks in the glass or something like that would have made for a more organic first boss, with him maybe erecting a shield of blocks at some point. But it is what it is. Speaking of is what it is, the story. I'm not really sure what to think about it. There's a bit of a lull random factor to it, but it's not like obnoxiously meta Deadpool humor, it's just kinda level ends, goofy thing happens, next level begins. It's not going to have you rolling on the floor in utter hysterics, but it also won't have you rolling your eyes. It's a serviceable WarioWare-esque non-plot that does well enough moving characters between gameplay scenarios that couldn't really accommodate a serious through line. This one's not a ready-made banger yet, but it is worth watching. With a little more polish, a lot more time and content to flesh itself out over, and the feedback and support it needs, this premise could go far. Despite existing outside my usual sphere of nepotism, this one managed to catch my attention just on how weird it is. And not weird in a funny, ha-ha meme sort of way. It asks a completely oddball question and provides the straightest answer possible. What if FNAF World, not FNAF in general, FNAF World specifically, was Freedom Planet? That's right, we got a combat-focused Sonic-like on our hands. By the way, guys, that's not what Freb is, okay? It's more like a faster-paced Kirby without the copy mechanic. There are 4 characters to choose from. Each one has their own moveset, and you can bring 2 into a level at once. Chica's an agile projectile-based character with 2 attacks. Her pizzas are easily the most overpowered move in the game, being able to actually somewhat traverse the extremely uneven terrain of this game and hit enemies. We'll be getting back to that later. Bonnie, on the other hand, is still agile, but he's more melee-focused. His short-range guitar smack ain't super useful, given the high speed, low traction, and enemy contact damage that this game boasts, but he does have a very high jump, which again, save that for later. Freddy, the main man, the big kahuna. He's the worst character in the game by far. He's got the slow melee combo and a paltry little backwards dodge, so you'd think he'd be designed for brawling with bosses, but again, well... And finally, Foxy. He's the fastest with his sort of boostish-like water dashing ability, and his double jump is also a nice option to have. He's got a little handgun that shoots straight ahead, though given how hilly this game is and the fact there's no aim assist or lock-on, it's not nearly as useful as Chica's bouncing pizzas. which isn't a euphemism, by the way. That sounds a lot weirder out loud than it looks to just like write it, but never mind. The game's got a very nice flow to it overall. Standard Sonic-like controls and physics, decent level design, and attacks that, say it with me, don't stop you in place and take out normal enemies very quickly. This sort of design's why I laud Kirby so highly as my action platformer inspiration. Let attacks be utility focused and just let the frame rate and damage come into their own during boss I absolutely hate the boss at the end of this demo. If I were doing scores for this one, I'd genuinely dock an entire point for this fight alone. The first boss of this game's a colossal fast-moving hurt box that can throw out even more colossal fast-moving hurt boxes on a moment's notice. It's taller than most characters can jump in the first place, so wide that even if it weren't, you still couldn't get past it. The left wall of the arena isn't consistently wall jumpable. Its Phase 2 starter is an equally tall mega laser, and just look at this footage. Keep in mind, you're dealing with all this in a game that operates on Sonic physics. You cannot just turn around on a dime and get out of the way of stuff. Not without jumping up at least, and potentially right into what you're trying to get out of the way of, to air dash at least. Which not all characters can do anyway. The only way I managed to clear this meat grinder of a boss fight was by cheating, and even then it wasn't easy, necessarily. Okay, pick Bonnie and Chica, get to the boss room. As soon as the battle begins, use Bonnie to jump up onto the platform. Immediately swap to Chica and begin hammering the pizza button like your life depends on it. Because due to the agreed-upon nomenclature of a single uninterrupted attempt in a video game being called a life, it technically does. Due to them being gravity-affected, you can rain down damage from the relative safety of this elevated perch. The boss can still bite ya, by the way. Its ball projectiles can still hit ya. So can its jump attack. And if anything does hit you, you're probably getting sent back to the ground. Immediately swap back to Bonnie. Don't bother getting in hits or trying to dodge. Just get back up there as fast as you can and get back to spamming pizzas. Alright, all that aside, the game looks and sounds nice and all. The player sprites especially are clean, well animated, and interesting interpretations of indie gaming's most iconic quartet. Not really much story going on here, but considering how weird, convoluted, and meta-aware, bordering on cringe the narrative of the original FNAF world is, I can't blame the dev for keeping things simple. So yeah, that's all I got this time. I was actually going to try out a few more demos for this, but time got away from me a little. My window of opportunity for prime recording time is very small and very inconsistent. In fact, I'm going to be trying to voice a whole other finished script I have just lying around, right after I'm done with this one. So, keep me and my larynx in your prayers, please. Talk at you some more right now.